may be a little bit controversial. I think in our society, this has a place. In times past, this would lead to rioting and long-term instability of a society.
He's been subjected to her feelings. Well, now your feelings are now hurting my feelings. And she's still saying you have to wait your turn.
If you're at this stage of development, you are valuable to someone or to something.
There's way more toxic femininity out there than there is toxic masculinity.
What you end up doing is you end up giving men a framework of what not to be instead of a positive framework of what to be. That doesn't really help them.
You just become a nagging woman. White knights and angry women on the internet that are a dime a dozen.
It's not an aspirational thing by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it's not. But
it's a reality of what keeps society together.
It's not what should be, it's what is.
It's the difference between ought and what is. Today, we're going to be talking about the male hierarchy of challenges. You may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but today we're going to look at those various needs and look at it through the prism of men's challenges in the modern world. But before we get into that, we're going to react to some stuff because that's what we're trying out. So, you ready for some out-of-pocket nonsense?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Typical doom scrolling Tuesday.
Men are of lower status. The most important thing you can bring them is being physically attractive. That's why men are addicted to porn. That's why guys look at Instagram photos and they'll do anything for a level of physical. When you get to a certain level where you've been with women that are that attractive, what becomes more important is peace. And it's confusing because you're so used to men being infatuated by your looks that when you date a guy who's been with 50 or 100 women and then he's dating you and he's like, hey, listen, I still think you're beautiful. It's more interested in me being able to get this work done so I can get my company to 8 or 9 figures. You need to be in the program helping me do that. Don't f with my sleep, with my workout, and with my work. Don't attack me, don't accuse me, and don't exaggerate. And you bring that peace. When you're dealing with high status men, peace is up here and looks are down here. When you're dealing with low status men, all they care about is looks.
That's an interesting set of frames. There's a comparison between like high status men and low status men. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Typical guys, I think hot take is they almost divorce themselves from the beautiful, attractive, like the beauty standards being real.
Sure.
And because they could never like get with that. And that's fine. But I think in the end, the priority is the same. No matter high status, low status, doesn't matter. Like that is the same. Unless there's a different program that is conditioning them.
Sure. So you're talking about how men of high status generally have a program to which they acclimate the women around them.
No, average dudes.
Okay, you're talking about average dudes.
Yeah, but if they are programmed to be like, no matter what, I would love this peace thing to be like my end priority.
Okay.
But now they're in this, they could never get with that, like a perfect 10.
Okay.
So
looks wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're okay with that. They already have settled for that part, which is fine. And when at the time when they can come to realize that that doesn't even matter anymore, what matters is like the actual, that peace factor, they don't get that because now they've been programmed the whole like do just enough good stuff to stay out of the doghouse for to have the you know what please.
Sure.
All of that. That's really sad to me. But absolutely 100% like I can see that when you can have whatever you want, like you can go out and buy whatever you want and whoever you want,
sure.
Honestly. Let's be honest here. But that becomes a thing, especially when you look around and you see this modern world and all of those, like put Kim Kardashian and Kylie up there and stuff. Do you really want all of that? And is it worth all of that? You know exactly what goes into all of that and what
There's a
goes
trade-off.
along with. Yeah. So I can absolutely 100% see that when you can go out and get whatever and whoever and whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah. That you see what really is what's important.
Cool. It brings 3 different things to mind to me. So the one thing is when we were talking about the captain and the passenger back in episode 3, this reminds me of qualities that make a good passenger. specifically someone that doesn't cause trouble.
Yep. Isn't a problem. I kept saying
She's not a problem,
it's
right?
funny how they
this
did that.
relates directly to peace. So if you're a captain that's doing your thing, it makes sense that you want a passenger that's not going to go ahead and mess with anything that you've got going on.
And mutiny.
And so in our lives, this reminds me of when I was retiring from the military, and we talked about this in another pod, where you were concerned about writing a blank check. And I'm like, look, I need to do certain things for our family to be good. I'm going to make sure to be responsive to you when it counts, but I need the flexibility to do what we need to do. And as a result of that, we grew so much in terms of our portfolio in those few years because of that willingness to hop on the program on your part.
I just really wanted to just put the feelers out there. It was, and we already talked about that it was navigated badly, but how do you know how to navigate something well that you've never done before?
Sure. And for you, it was just a matter of your security glands just screaming at you, and you didn't know, you just needed assurance that you were going to be taken care of.
Was more like, how is this going to be different? What is the dynamic? Really, I really wanted to know what the vibes were.
And the third thing that it brought to mind is, so I was recording some videos earlier today, and one of the taglines at the end of one of the shorts that we did was, it's not about curves, it's about character. If you have to make the choice between the two.
That's true.
And let's be honest, you don't really have to make the choice between the two, but a lot of times that is the case. And this is what's going on, is just because a woman is a 10 doesn't mean she gets to go ahead and write the ticket. The guy who is on his grind and on his game and is attractive to these women gets to set the rules for the most part. And that's it. That makes sense?
Yes, absolutely. Watching some of those, like the pop the balloon videos.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. You could tell, like, a lot of the guys who were on their game and doing their thing. And I don't know what they're doing on a dating show like that. I guess just maybe for the exposure. Maybe, I don't know. But
I don't doubt that their DMs got hit up.
some of them were a lot like pop immediately. Why? Too much. It's too much. Like, I just know, like, pretty much instantly they're like, I know you're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not about that. And some of the more average guys, even, there was one guy who literally popped his balloon instantly when she walked out, and she was like, everything was popping.
Sure. Except
And he was like, I can't afford you.
that's honesty.
He knows what he's about.
Sure.
I just thought that was hysterical right there. I was like, okay.
He knows what's up.
Okay, sir.
There you go. Let's go ahead and move to the next one.
Wait, Brian, did you just say that you don't like challenges?
When it comes to dating, no, I don't.
Okay. I think you're just self-admitting and not being an alpha, because that's what makes some relationships more exciting and for the guys to keep pursuing, because if it was safe and stable, it gets more
No.
That's how girls.
Okay, first off, we're talking about dating. I absolutely engage in challenging things when it comes to my business, when it comes to all that. I'm not shying away from challenge. When it comes to dating, again, Proverbs 21:19, better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. I don't want my partner to be a challenge. I don't want to date a fence sitter chick. I don't want to date a girl who's playing hard to get, because if you play hard to get, you quickly become hard to want.
Bars.
Oh,
Like, seriously. So this goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about. What other thoughts do you have on this?
Oh, it's hysterical that he pulled out the whole Proverbs verses and stuff. There's one in 25 too, by the way. Talking about it's better to live on the roof of your house than to sit there with a nagging wife. And it's so true. It's just, these chicks are like, you're not an alpha.
Because you don't want to deal with my problems.
I have no words. Like, really.
It's just one of those things where I think there's delusion about what they bring to the table and what their partner should put up with. And I think that this often comes from the thought process behind, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best, which is just this feminist mantra that's just
It's
absolute
sense.
right? Because we're talking about dudes that are on their grind and handling their business and stepping up and handling challenges out in the world. They climb mountains and slay dragons and bring home treasure. They don't sleep with the dragon at home. You don't go and say, yes, I want a dragon to wrestle with every day.
You're not Donkey from Shrek.
We are not Donkey from Shrek. That's just not it. And so that last bit where he's saying, if you play hard to get, it's very often that you will eventually become hard to want.
I love that. That was like the best. I was like, boom, right there.
Because I think this is so true even in marriages, is when a woman decides that she wants to go ahead and try to hold all the cards and throw off polarity, it is real easy to see this dynamic at play where if she's trying to go ahead and girl boss her way to the moon and the guy is out doing what he needs to be doing, it's very often that they don't match up well in terms of other things going on in the relationship.
Again, the captain and passenger, the itinerary is not the same.
Sure. So she hopped on the boat and he hasn't kicked her out off the boat yet. And usually that dynamic ends up that way.
It's terrible. Like, how do you... Her claiming that he's not an alpha because he doesn't want to put up with it. No, he can't go an alpha if there's no one to follow.
There's that, and it's the assumption that he should go ahead and put up with it.
Yeah.
Is the issue, right? She assumes that a guy that is doing well will put up with that nonsense. And a guy that knows his worth will not. And she's not bringing enough to the table for him to even have to consider it. It might be for recreational use only, not so much for a long time.
Sure. You can go cage match with a tiger, but you got to leave the tiger in its cage and walk away.
Yeah, you're going to go ahead and probably have some bumps and bruises and some scars from it, but some people will go ahead and make that choice for themselves.
But what's interesting is a lot of men today, the fact that he's actually unsubscribing from the program and she's calling him insecure.
No, that's
pretty
the
much.
opposite.
No, she's calling him insecure.
I get it.
And the fact that he is revealing or like calling it too much attention to the program that is at hand here.
Are you saying that because he's putting out there the rules of the game?
Yeah. And then she's trying to shame him back into submission.
Sure. And he's refusing, which is the right move.
And it's really sad how many guys today, when you say, are you going to put up with that? They didn't even know they had a choice.
But so many dudes are socialized in our social order to be of feminine mind and to be pre-whipped so that when they get into a relationship, they assume that they need to be bending over backwards for the good of the woman rather than making sure that his needs are met too.
I just saw this one thing where this guy was walking out of a convenience store and the wife is like recording him walking out with like gummy worms and a Mountain Dew and a bag of chips or something.
Okay.
And it finally took 30 years for him to understand what, no, I don't need anything, I'm fine means. And so many are like, oh, wow, you've got him trained. Wow, it only took 30 years. How'd you do that? I'm like,
The delusion is insane.
it hurts. It hurts right here.
It's just one of those things where it's, look, if you want something and it's a tangible thing, just ask for it.
I know. Why is that so wrong?
Because this is their version of wanting to know and be known.
So effed up. It's so effed up.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one.
What do I do if your feelings hurt my feelings?
That's fine. You just have to wait your turn. So I could be telling you that I'm upset that you didn't text me today because I felt totally ignored, and in turn, you might be sad that we've been having a lot of hard discussions lately. We're both experiencing disconnection, but if I'm initiating, you can't bulldoze over me with your feelings. Because when you do that, then I'll think that I'm not allowed to have negative emotions in the relationship because then it'll just upset you.
So that's interesting. He brings up the question, what do we do when your feelings hurt my feelings?
So the whole premise behind this whole thing to make this into a video and post it is to show that this is a healthy relationship working together like they should.
This is part of the social programming right here.
And she says things like that we've been having all these hard discussions lately. And so it implies a series of these things have been happening.
Sure.
So he's been exposed or subjected to her feelings in succession, like repeatedly. This is like a multi-episode series. And then he's finally saying, okay, well now your feelings are now hurting my feelings. And she's still saying, you have to wait your turn. Apparently, he's been waiting his turn for a while and he's finally saying something and he still has to wait his turn. So I don't know. I don't know much about anything. But maybe it's never going to be his turn.
That's what it sounds like, right? Is he's bringing up his end, and then instead of addressing it directly, she makes it about her immediately.
She's saying that your feelings are now bulldozing me.
Okay, so the way that she reframed it, instead of answering directly, she's like, if I bring something up, you can't go ahead and bulldoze my feelings. That's not the question he asked. He asked...
Just threw it out there.
Yeah, he asked, when your feelings are hurting my feelings, what am I supposed to do? And she said, wait your turn. And you can't bulldoze me because otherwise I'm not going to feel safe. What do you think that does to the dude? If you want him to go ahead and be sensitive and you want him to be vulnerable and you want him to go ahead and actually share his feelings with you and you bulldoze him every time and shame him for it, he's not going to do that.
Even he's talking about like hypothetically.
Yeah.
This is not even an actual thing right at this second. And she just unloads. And it's not even a real thing that he's actually saying. He's hypothetically speaking. How would that work? And she's just, I was like.
This has such a positive like reaction from the society as a whole. But I think it fits in with the way that our society is programmed to really care more about women's stuff than men's stuff.
And this is honestly like exhibit A of when we were talking about advice for young boys.
Okay.
Until you are in an established, you've seen some things relationship, do not get to that vulnerable place.
Yeah, don't show your underbelly.
'Cause this right here.
But at the same time, if you are constantly being bombarded by this,
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it. You should go ahead and leave this relationship.
See the last two examples.
Right?
This is a problem.
This is a problem child. And it's insane to me that he puts up with this and that he puts up with being shamed on social media in a public way like this.
Yeah.
All right. So with that as kind of like a precursor to the topic at hand, that last one really flows into what we're getting at today is the hierarchy of men's challenges. And that's going to be a little bit later on down the levels. But to start, we'll go ahead and do a quick overview. So level 1 is the baseline level is survival and stability. Cool. And then the second level is safety and security. And then we've got belonging and brotherhood, identity and purpose, and fulfillment and legacy are the 5 general levels that a man ascends to, and he has different kinds of challenges that are associated with the different levels. You ready to get into it?
Sure.
All right. So level 1 is the foundation. If you don't have your basic needs met, nothing else matters. Right? And it's just one of those deals where if you aren't cutting it in life and you can't even live, none of this other stuff matters. It doesn't matter about having a purpose or anything if you cannot afford to live, which is a really common problem that's happening in our society at a baseline level. Now, 2 common challenge areas that I look at here is 1, economic pressures on men, and 2, like physical health risks. Do either of those tickle your fancy for one that you would want to talk about first? No? Let's talk about physical health
Dealer's
risks.
choice, please and thank you.
Physical health risks. What do you think are like some of the bigger challenges to men in terms of their physical health?
Heart attacks.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough.
From within or without?
So what do you mean?
Are you going to live with that Proverbs 21 woman or are you going to live with the 31?
Okay. There you go. I would say that's more like a mental health and relationship thing, but I get what you're saying.
But like it can have physical ramifications.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if your mental health is not on point, it could definitely go ahead and cause you problems.
Also, if you get up to that point where you're like doing the whole like selecting a person to be with and all of that stuff, and then she decides to, when you don't have that to do, then you get knocked back down to this bottom rung.
So by your various gestures, you're saying if she decides to blow money and not talk to you about it
And drain you dry.
and drain you dry, okay.
She'll drain you dry in more ways than one.
She probably won't drain you dry that one way if the other way.
Not in the good way.
Not in the good way. So when I think of physical health risks, like one thing is self-deletion is a big deal.
Yes.
Is dudes are super lonely. We'll talk more about that. I think that the hesitancy for men to go see a doctor is another thing that really comes up a lot. Is a lot of guys will just put up with pains and aches and things of that nature and just say, I'll just rub some dirt on it. It'll be fine.
Well, especially when you're at this level and you're just trying to survive and you don't really have that much to play around with, especially at that point where you're in your like 30s where you're still not or you're still young enough where I'm super hurting today because I slept wrong. We had that conversation.
Yeah. Now in our 40s is a little bit different.
Yeah,
right?
it is. I'm just saying, like, in your 30s, this is really bothering me. It's fine. It's not worth going to see a doctor over.
Sure. And I think that a wise man would know the difference and say, hey, this is odd, and have the self-awareness to say, look, this really needs to get checked out, and to find the circumstances that need to happen for that to be a thing. Because I understand that some people just don't have health insurance or things of that nature, so maybe they need to find like an affordable clinic or something nearby. Shoot, here where we live, there's a really great nonprofit clinic that people on the lower income spectrum can go to go ahead and get medical assistance if they don't have insurance or the means to go ahead and pay. And there's a lot of resources that have been poured into that clinic so that they can take care of those that are less fortunate.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you have a community that you're part of, like a church or some kind of organization, generally, if you talk to somebody one-on-one that you're close to and you say, hey, I have this thing, and chances are some people are like, you're having a health thing and you can't, no, let me help you with that. Or let me find some people who can help you with that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because if you're still stuck at this survival phase, you will not have had the time or the clarity of mind to go seek that support system out in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
To have that established as part of your normal network. Whereas I think that once you have your basics covered, it's easier to have the mind space to look for that, because a lot of time when you're just stuck in it, you just don't know what you don't know, and you put your blinders on and you just grind, and you live in such a way as to just barely survive.
Yeah. That kind of spirit, that bootstraps kind of spirit, is admirable, but it'll only take you so far.
I'm not even going to go ahead and say that, because I think that the old idea of a bootstrap mentality is not alive and well in the young.
No, it's not. And that's why it's, hey, I get where that's at, and that's admirable because it's so rare today, but it has its limitations.
Sure. Usually you do that to the point to get up in further levels, and then you're much more able to cope with things associated with this level of struggle. So other things are lifestyle factors. Like for the most part, most people are working sedentary jobs nowadays.
Yes.
And nutrition is terrible. Like people are eating all kinds of junk food and getting fat, and that's causing problems. And like low testosterone levels are a huge piece of all of that, right? Is if you go ahead and live this sedentary life, have terrible eating habits, you don't take care of yourself.
Eat a lot of processed food, it's going to suppress your hormones and all of that. It's going to have an effect.
And it'll reduce like your energy, your drive, your vitality for life. And it ends up being like a self-licking ice cream cone of disaster.
Downward spiral.
It is a downward spiral in and of itself.
And I see that a lot in those kind of where you are traditionally, you have a man who's like a blue collar worker and they've been having trouble like getting, if they do a specific niche, like skilled labor.
Okay.
They'll go do a quick solution is like becoming a truck driver. But that is in and of itself, you sit all day and you're exposed to mainly your options are like fast food and gas stations and stuff like that to get where you're going. And that lends itself to this kind of thing.
I don't know too many truckers that look healthy.
Yep, exactly.
When I see the average trucker, they're obese, they've got 40-inch or bigger waistlines, and they're eating fast food.
That's just the nature of the beast right there.
I think it's living a life that is not intentional, right? Is you are focused on this piece of the puzzle to the exclusion of other necessary pieces. So you might have your economics on point, but you don't have your health on point.
By the way, truckers, nicest people on the planet.
Yeah, nothing against them.
Truckers, they're so sweet people.
On a personal basis.
Yeah.
But we would be remiss to go ahead and not take a look at it and see it for what it is. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror. You can go ahead and look, but unless you are actually willing to see what it is, you can have all kinds of delusions about yourself. Another thing that affects the physical health of men, I would say, is substance abuse is far more prevalent in men than it is in women. Like, you're much more likely to go ahead and get addicted to alcohol or drugs or things of that nature because it ends up being used as a sedative. Is you're sedating yourself to not deal with the struggles of life. Does that ring a bell to you at all?
I think substance abuse is more prevalent in men, but I think addictive tendencies are more prevalent in women.
Maybe so. We can go ahead and look at some stats afterwards and go ahead and figure out what's what. But when I look at like things that like drug abuse, smoking, alcohol, the stats that I've read on that lean substantially towards men.
Yeah.
And I think that it's because they have to go ahead and like just cope with all of these challenges in life.
Definitely. They can have a steady source for self-medication.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about the physical health risks over here at the survival and stability level. I think that also something that's really getting people down is economic pressures.
Yeah, more and more.
And I think that one of the things to look at is student debt and a mismatch in careers. We talked about this a while ago, how a lot of times women more specifically will go ahead and get degrees in dumb fields that don't actually pay for the cost of the degree over the lifetime of the career. And more we're seeing this to be the case for men as well, is they're spending all this time and all this money on a degree and they're not actually getting paid well enough to make it make sense.
I think especially our generation and younger, we were sold this lie. Go to college, get a degree, and then you can have like more money, a steady income, and blah, 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 blah. We were like sold this lie. And of course, our parents widely did not have the money to pay for that kind of thing. And so they were like, it's okay, you can get loans. You fill out this thing and the government helps you find financial aid and all this stuff. And it's like, no, they don't. Not enough.
Sure.
Definitely not enough. It's okay. Fannie and Freddie will cover it.
Or whatever, like student loan company. One thing to go ahead and really look at is I'm not sure that they sold us a lie. I think it's to them, it was the truth for the script that was sold to them. But to us, it makes less sense because the idea of a college education is more ubiquitous. And when you have more of something, it is less valuable. Does that make sense? If the assumption is go to college, get a good job, well, then you're going to have all these people going to college And there's only so many good jobs for those college graduates.
And that is, yes, that was a simplistic kind of, in a nutshell, kind of
Sure.
summarization of it. But the result was everybody bought into it. And now we don't have enough people to take over industries of like skilled labor, like plumbers and electricians and stuff like that, because everybody went to college and they expect to go get a cubicle job that makes great money, better than climbing under houses and blah, 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 blah. So now the average plumber makes way more money than in like our generation when they first started telling this or selling us this narrative.
Sure. And I think it's interesting because when you look at it, this goes back to supply and demand, is if there's not enough people generating jobs that these educations should go ahead and naturally flow into, the value of that education declines precipitously. Whereas things like the skilled trades have their own value because you are solving a problem directly for a customer. If you are installing air conditioning, that's important when you're dealing with 100-degree temperatures outside. And so there's going to be this natural urgency to go ahead and get that done. Whereas some like nameless, faceless HR professional, wherever, that's over here getting replaced by AI now.
Yeah.
That's almost like an invented demand, where most of the time they're covering some form of legal liability that was invented by government regulation, or they're there so that they can oversee the results of government regulation. So they don't provide like an economic utility other than playing defense. It's like the cost of compliance for a company. Like, it's crazy that way.
It is.
So another big challenge that I hear a lot is the housing affordability crisis. So this is an interesting problem because I see it much more as a problem in major metro areas than I see it in cities about the size of ours. If you go to Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, they have so many regulations reducing access to building new housing. One, so the supply cannot go up. And if the supply cannot go up and you have increasing demand, of course, prices go up. The second thing is they have incredibly crazy regulations in terms of things like rent control, where it sounds like such a good thing. To go ahead, we're going to control your rent and it never goes up by more than however much percent in a given year. Yeah, that's fine until the end result of it is the rent that's coming in no longer pays for the expenses that go out.
Yeah, so many of these proposed like regulation changes and increases and blah, 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 blah. It sounds so great in the way they spin it as a service to whatever demographic is underserved, underrepresented, all this stuff, until then you have to go and enact it. And there's just so much more that we didn't foresee it being this problem. It's like, if you just sat and thought about it for a second, it would be.
Right. And the thing is, you have low information voters that like are susceptible to this propaganda that don't think through 2 or 3 steps ahead. Is, oh, if a landlord has no incentive to go ahead and maintain their housing, why would they do that?
Or they don't care.
So what's interesting is a lot of landlords in those major cities, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, are intentionally leaving building vacant because it is more valuable to them for the building to be vacant and to be able to sell it to someone else than it is to actually rent it to tenants. So what it effectively does is takes unit out of the marketplace, and now the rents on everything else that doesn't have rent control go up because there's more demand.
And it's so interesting because all of the vitriol is fired at places where they have big companies that of property ownership and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, they're just trying to make money off of us, blah, blah, blah. But it's like most of the general like rental property market is occupied by people who have 1 and 2 small places where they're just trying to supplement their retirement income.
You're not talking about like big institutional investors.
Yeah, they're not sitting here trying to make fat stacks. They're just trying to get some
income stability
some
over
rocking
time.
chair money. And it's, oh, these evil people. No, they're just trying to like actually not be on cat food and
Crackers.
crackers.
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of people don't recognize the nuance there. Is they're very quick to go ahead and look at black and white terms instead of understanding why things are the way they are and not looking specifically at what should be, but failing to recognize the deficiency of what is. So this goes back to descriptive and prescriptive truths. A lot of times people are locked in on what it should be and failing to recognize the way that it is and how it came to be that way.
Yeah, just like the whole eat the rich thing, like same thing.
Yeah, you eat them and then all of a sudden there's nothing left. Good job, guys. You ruined everything.
Killed the golden goose.
You've killed the golden goose. Think about it this way. They went ahead and did that in Argentina back in the early 20th century. And it is only now that they finally start having good economic growth. And it's only because they went ahead and elected like a national head of state that is actually setting austerity measures in place. So they stop spending these crazy amounts and having rampant inflation. Let it be known that the biggest contributors to the housing affordability crisis are money printing on the part of our government. We went ahead and printed a crap ton of money since COVID. And as a result, when money supply goes up, the value of assets go up as well so they can keep up with that inflation.
Y'all just love them checks.
Well, but the thing is, that's the fundamental difference is when you have this escalating difference between those who have and those who have not, the biggest difference right now is the people that have the presence of mind to know that assets are the thing that goes up in value. And so the smart money goes into assets. Where the people that don't have are buying things like cars, big screen TVs, these things that go down in value that will never keep up. And so by making these decisions over and over time, they will never be able to climb out. Whereas if you went ahead and spent even like $100 a month getting something like shares in the S&P 500, you'll eventually build up passive income through the dividend that comes quarterly from that, and you'll have the appreciation of the asset over time. But a lot of these people don't have that and don't have that mindset to focus on assets rather than looking at people's income.
We are not dispensing financial advice. Please go see a professional.
Sure. If you want to talk a little bit about your personal situation, by all means, we can go ahead and have a chat. Just know that we are not financial advisors.
But this might be something you want to look into.
And then so the other thing that people go ahead and talk about is a living wage and wage stagnation. Like, holy cow, the TikTok is just took one of our conversations about how we describe how one of our employees' paycheck comes to be in the first place. And they just took it way out of pocket real quick. But the idea is when people look at the 1970s for when the big difference between CEO compensation and the compensation of the average person, in the early 1970s, we had a few things that were going on. We finally left the gold standard in its entirety. So now we had no coupling to a hard asset for the source of our money, which, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that are good about having the monetary policy that we have now because it allows us to invest in things with substantially less risk with a greater chance of reward than we would without it. But it comes with a trade-off, and the trade-off is inflation. So there's that piece of the puzzle, money printing, leaving the gold standard, and then globalization was another thing that happened starting in the 1970s is we would go ahead and offshore a lot of low-skill tasks and manufacturing over to China, and we would go ahead and arbitrage the value of labor. So companies would go ahead and hire people in China to go ahead and assemble the things at this minuscule like pay rate compared to what people in the United States were demanding to do the same thing.
It's so funny. I actually had an impromptu conversation with a bunch of 7th graders about this very thing because one of the kids I go into from our 9th grade class to the 7th grade class, and we do our morning like little Bible conversation.
Okay.
And the kid was opening up his Bible and he goes, "Wait, this was made in China? Don't they they don't allow Bibles there. And so we actually, we actually had a conversation about how, they'll make our stuff and ship it to us, but they have views about how they run their own country.
It's about where the money is.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it's cheaper to make
The money
Bible in China.
talks. They'll go ahead and do the job, even if they find the job to be deplorable because it pays the bills for them.
Fun fact, premium Bibles are actually made in Europe.
But another thing to look at this whole like stagnant wages versus inflation thing is the value of labor to a company has also stagnated, right? So the three typical drivers of value in a company are land, labor, and capital, right? Definitionally. And land only really goes up as inflation goes up or as localized demand requires it. So if you're in Los Angeles and you've got this big factory and other people want your factory, they're willing to go ahead and pay you more because they want your thing, because the ability to build a new one from scratch is nearly non-existent there. Now, labor, if you're not really increasing your ability to be productive at a rate that is higher than the pace of inflation, then it's hard to see how you should go ahead and reap the benefit of that. But the real thing that's been changing the game since the 1970s is the capital contribution to how companies are valuable. It is the systems, the processes, the procedures, the ideas. Those are the things that are more valuable rather than the person actually touching the buttons. And I think a lot of people fail to recognize where their contributions go and how they are compensated.
Yeah, again, tied to aforementioned globalization.
I think that's a piece of it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the whole story.
No, it has ties to.
Sure. So we went ahead and talked about how men face economic pressures, especially like just to live.
Just to live.
We're not even talking about
We haven't gotten to
like a
level.
family.
This is the bottom level.
And like, don't get me wrong. Would it be nice to go ahead and be able to do some menial task and have no worries?
Like our grandparents.
No, not necessarily like our grandparents, but like a lot of people talk about a living wage where they're like, hey, every job deserves a living wage is the beat of their drum. But the unfortunate reality is that is not the case.
I honestly, saying the weird thing, like, I think that there should be, like, the minimum wage job should be this entry level, like, learning how to do a job, learning how to be on time, learning how to, like, take criticism and learn a certain thing. And it's not a life, like, it's not a career path.
It's the bottom rung of a ladder.
That's what minimum wage work was meant to be.
I think people would go ahead and disagree with you on that, but I think that
now they would.
I think in a modern context, it makes the most sense to do that, right? Like I remember Jim Rohn would go ahead and talk about minimum wage, and he's, look, the minimum wage is not a bed that you sleep in. It's a ladder. It's a ladder, he would say, right?
And that's absolutely, I think, it's spot. I think that's what ought to be. And I think originally that's what the design was.
Sure, it was designed to be that way. But the thing is, when the minimum wage was instituted, you also had very recently instituted, in very limited cases, the idea of a 40-hour work week. Because prior to like Ford and the assembly line, the work week was not 40 hours. It was 60, 80, 100 hours a week to go ahead and get by.
Yeah, 12,
and it is
16-hour shifts.
Sure, and it's a relatively modern notion that it should be anything other than that. And so I think a lot of it comes from an entitlement mentality where you say, I think that I deserve this. However, the realities around it do not match up with that you deserve, which reminds me of the dating game and how women will go ahead and have these crazy elevated standards. And then when they go to the dating market, they find that they are not getting picked because the men that they want do not want them. And if they do want them, they don't want them alone. They want them as part of a harem.
The whole fresh and fit, like,
the calculator?
Cutler scale.
Oh, man, we could go ahead and do one of those videos later on. That would be hilarious. All right, so this is the foundational level, right? And you can see that if people are struggling here, there's no way to go ahead and climb the ladder into other challenges. One way to go ahead and encapsulate this is if this layer fails, men are constantly living in survival mode, like paycheck to paycheck. They're constantly stressed out about finances. They end up with poor health and some numbing addictions. And so they lack the energy or the margin to go ahead and reach up and grab for higher challenges.
And if you do at this level tack on a family, it is only impacting this whole situation worse.
I think that if you unintentionally have a family, that's the first problem. The second problem is that if you don't have a solid grasp on what your family is about, like you had alluded to before, it is very easy when you have mismatched expectations to go from a higher level of living back down to the survival stage. And that is really sad, but it's a reality of life.
I think there are quite a few people today that stay at this level and intentionally, not even not intentionally, just kind of tack on a family and kids to this situation.
Sure. Yeah, it's something that we see.
It's just, what are we doing here?
A lot of it is just people feeling things and then using that to guide their life rather than being intentional about things. So let's move on to the second level. This is safety and security. So once you have basic stability, now men typically need to feel secure in their future and their personal lives. And so the three overarching topics here are family law and custody issues is a really popular topic among men, career and workplace security, and personal safety. Let's talk about personal safety to start. So we talked about self-deletion rates are substantially higher in men, but we also see that the riskiest behaviors are typically done by men. And a lot of this has to do with guys having the greater variability in their genes. Like we talked about in times past where they're the smartest people in the world and the dumbest people in the world are typically men.
Yeah.
Because the greater genetic variation between each of them. You've seen plenty of risky behavior from dudes, yes?
They made a whole show about it and some movies.
You talking about Jackass?
It's called Jackass.
Yeah. They were doing it I guess it wasn't for the clicks back then.
No.
They were doing it for the memes.
They were doing it for the ratings.
For the ratings and for
And
the money.
Yeah.
It's
I think
entertaining.
Steve-O did all of that stuff to his body just for the fun of it. Nah.
Maybe a part of it. Maybe a part of it.
He wasn't cut out to do anything else.
Sure. And
I've heard him literally say that, so don't even come after me.
Yeah. And so another thing about like personal safety is I think this is where you can start talking about not having good networks, right? And if you don't have a good social system in play, it's really easy to go ahead and get knocked down when you have financial issues and when you have social issues or relationship issues. Shoot, this is something that is pretty common for women is to go ahead and find a coven to go ahead and be with.
Yeah.
Whereas with dudes, I think finding a place to belong is not naturally in our rule book, but it should be.
Especially, it's all the harder when being a man, being masculine is not acceptable in feminized culture.
Sure. Or it just looks different. Or they'll say one thing and they'll do another. And I think really it's just, they have rules for different categories and calibers of men is what it really is. I think if you're a dude and you're hot and you got things going, they'll accept all of these behaviors from you. They would not accept from like the postman or the guy that's serving them their food or the cashier. Does that check out?
They'll accept it from one side of their mouth. The other side of their mouth is reserved for all the shaming of this. Oh, he's a dude's man. How did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Like that one thing you showed me, or the one.
Well, this goes back to the idea of don't watch what they say or don't listen to what they say, but watch what and who they do.
What and who they do. Exactly.
Right? And that'll give you the idea for their left and right boundaries is they'll make rules for some and not for others. But in fact,
that guy who white knighted, is that story you showed me this morning?
Oh, where the guy was standing up for some chick that was getting humiliated by their manager, and then he leaves the job because he went ahead and got written up, and then all of a sudden he finds out that they ended up in bed together afterwards, and he's like, why did I even do this?
It's funny. You just showed me the headline, and there was like a whole story. I'm like, I don't even need to read the story. Like, that is it. That's all I need to know.
The headline tells the whole thing.
Exactly. You don't need to
Like,
go
you can
into
fill in the
story.
blanks.
But it's just, see, this is where this gets you.
I think this goes ahead and fits in with career and workplace safety, right? Is like a lot of dudes are caught in a really odd place where they have to go ahead and mind their P's and Q's. They can't go ahead and be traditionally masculine. They have to go ahead and make themselves acceptable to the females in their workplace because of the integration of the workplace. And so if they go ahead and say something even slightly askew, then they go ahead and get sent to HR. And it's just, what are we on about?
But any of y'all hear the words work wife and work husband? No.
You might want to be
No.
concerned about that just a little bit. There may be some truth in it. No matter what is said, there's probably some doing going on.
I'm just saying, Coldplay concerts may or may not be present
There you go.
in this equation.
So other things that I would say that are a cause for concern in terms of safety and security in career in the workplace is I think a lot of guys are resorting to the gig economy, which is really risky. Because I heard this story on Fresh and Fit earlier this week about how a dude got his car repossessed because he was doing like Uber or something. And as a part of the financing package, it was expressly prohibited in the financing contract that they could not use the vehicle for commercial use.
Oh, okay.
And so the dude was paying all of he was paying his loan, he was paying his insurance, all of it was paid up. He was doing what he needed to do from a financial perspective, but it became known to the company that had a lien on the vehicle that he was using it in a way that was against the terms and conditions of his loan. There's a lot of loan programs for houses that do the same thing. Like an FHA loan, if you go ahead and buy it and then you don't live in it and then you go and rent it out before the predetermined period of time, they can go ahead and foreclose on your house even if you are like up to date on your payments. It is within the boundaries of the loan.
Yeah. And also, you just are so keen to get a vehicle or get a home and you don't even pay attention to that. That is the worst. Like, the consequences from negligence like that is like,
Well, I'll tell you what.
because you can't do anything about it. It's just like,
So here's the
it
thing.
isn't the consequences of your own actions.
I think that in some ways, AI is coming for a lot of people's jobs. But in this specific case, AI could have been really helpful if you'd just known, just take pictures of the thing.
Scan this for me. Tell
have-
me what it is.
Have
what to do.
ChatGPT go ahead and say, or give it in your prompt, hey, I want to go ahead and buy a car to go ahead and serve for Uber. Is there going to be any problems? What should I be concerned about in this contract? Or even if you're not like really specific and say, hey, are there any terms and conditions in this loan agreement that are not standard boilerplate terms? And chances are that would pop right up.
Yeah.
So speaking of AI and coming for people's jobs, I remember there were 3,000 HR professionals that got kicked out of IBM. They went ahead and just fired them all, and they replaced them with AI. And it turns out that when you're talking about policy and procedure and handbooks and things of that nature, it's really easy to replace a lot of those functions with AI and automation. And so a lot of these people that are crying at the hills for the best possible compensation, or they need to go ahead and make a certain amount, be careful that you're not in an industry that is easily replaceable. There's a lot of different like employment avenues that are being taken over by AI and automation, partially because of all these demands for higher wages for these things that really don't take much skill that can be replaced by these things.
Sorry, my brain was slow. HR?
Yes.
Probably most of them were women.
Well, you're probably not wrong. You're probably not wrong because they like going ahead and holding people to the rules and things of that nature. But I think that's it's just reality right now. Is we are living in this time where AI, there are left and right boundaries to what AI can do. But it's important to know whether your industry is currently in those boundaries or if it's like in the narrow periphery on either side of the boundary.
So the bat might come for you.
And figuring out what to do now, whether you're going to go ahead and get really good at operating AI so that you can be like the guy that gets kept to run it.
One of the few that are retained to sanity check it because you know how to manipulate or command it.
Sure. And I think in the future, it's going to be people that are directing AI agents to do the work. And the value is in the direction, the ability to coordinate all these functions like a symphony conductor. That is a really difficult task even when you're looking at just professionals, right? Having a professional orchestra is one thing, but to go ahead and do it with programmed AI agents is something different. You need to know a little bit about how the fundamentals of the system works to do that. And so I think that that's going to be a really valuable skill set to have going on. And the people that are on the other end of it, where they're just doing the thing,
They're just going to get rolled by
they're
this.
going to get rolled. And there's going to be a lot of negative consequences that come from that in terms of our economy. And so I encourage people now to start building the skills that you need for the future, whether it is in an AI-proof industry like HVAC or electricians or plumbing. The skilled trades are unlikely to be replaced by AI at a grand scale. And other things like community and connection are things that are not able to really be replaced by AI. You can go ahead and try to replace AIs or replace people in terms of an intimate companion, because that's what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to go ahead and come up with AI girlfriends to sate people and AI robots to go ahead and intimate robots to go ahead and handle the other needs, which is crazy, but it is coming. But it exists. Like for people that are rich, they can go ahead and buy these robots now, like $100,000 or $150,000. But like when that technology becomes ubiquitous in the society, there's going to be implications that come from it. All right, so we talked a little bit about the whole like safety and security layer of challenges. And generally, if this layer fails, men feel vulnerable, disposable, and constantly anxious. And so they will not take risks in relationships, career, or personal growth to be able to ascend to the next piece. Is if they are insecure where they're at, they will not have the space or the mind frame or the presence of mind to find challenges and take risks to climb. All of that makes sense? So the next level is belonging and brotherhood. So this all is about connection, and without this connection, men are lonely and they often get into destructive, isolating behaviors. So the three topic areas under this are male isolation, generally speaking, the decline of traditional communities, and negative substitutes. Let's start with negative substitutes. So
Corn.
And parasocial relationships, right?
Yeah.
Right? So
E-girls,
OF, things of that nature, right? Is if men are using this as a replacement for natural intimacy because either they can't cut it or they don't like to see, or they don't like what their level of competency can afford for them.
and they don't want to improve.
This is where it ends up. Now, what I'm going to say may be a little bit controversial. I think in our society, this has a place because without this kind of thing, if men can't find mates, in times past, this would lead to rioting and long-term instability of a society. So in some ways, it is important for the necessary cogs that are doing useful things to have something, even if it is a shadow of the actual thing, to maintain order in society.
So we still need some people to be plugged into the matrix.
I think more and more there's going to be people plugged into the matrix.
Well, especially
I mean, it's not an aspirational thing by any stretch of the
No,
imagination.
it's not. But
it's a reality of what keeps society
it's not
together.
what should be. It's what is.
It's the difference between ought and what is. You're right.
And the fact that even in an effort to get from what is to what ought to be, you can't just jump there. You have to move the needle by degrees. So yeah, this is a way for things to not be overwhelmingly crazy.
Sure. And then, so aside from corn and OF and things of that nature, I would say that like online echo chambers are another form of destructive like isolation or negative substitutes, right? So if you're like in the far leftist realms of Reddit, man, there's all kinds of nonsense.
Get out of my brain. I was thinking about Reddit.
Right? There's all kinds of nonsense there. And then if you are not a fan of the things on the right, then you would think that 4chan and things like that would be negative echo chambers there. Whereas I think that we become increasingly incapable as a society of having positive discourse with one another. We cannot disagree without being disagreeable. And we are increasingly polarized and do not have the capability, thanks to public education and like social programming, to actually speak through in a calm manner our differences. And so this is a natural result of that, is rather than being willing to deal in good faith with people that you disagree with, this is the natural result.
And even within macro groups, like the general like progressive side, there are different flavors. And I think especially you see this in the more conservative side.
Well, I see
there are
more
different flavors, and they're all like, they're infighting with one another.
I think that for conservatives, there is more allowance for diversity of thought as a group. And I'm going to go ahead and pull a graph from a recent study that I read on the matter, where on the left, you have a very narrow orthodoxy of what acceptable opinions are. And if you step outside of it, they kick you out. They're like, you're not part of the club.
Yeah.
And then you see on the right, they're like, oh, maybe you're a little wacky in this area, but we have common ground here. Let's work together for common purposes. I see there's more tolerance for that on the right than I see on the left.
Definitely on the left side, there is more of a
Like
trigger,
a monoculture.
like a canceled trigger finger.
It's increasingly sensitive about an ever broadening array of topics. So you could just go ahead and say one thing about one hot button issue, and then they're going to get all up in arms like that.
Yeah.
Because they are so itching for a fight and they do not want anybody different with them. So as much as they crow about diversity is strength and all of this, if you think differently than them, get the hell out of here with that.
But I still think that the deeper sides of either camp, they pretty much have a monkey fist as far as their ideology.
Sure, and I would say that there is some truth to that, but I would say that the concentration of that is much higher on the left than it is on the right, because there's much more acceptance of different general thought processes.
I would say more there's a wider margin of the spectrum on that side.
I'd agree with that.
To be like, you don't align, get out of here.
Sure, I think it is
We don't want your kind around here.
relatively rare for that to be the case, and it would have to be like over some just crazy point of view that they're like, I never want to be associated with you in that name. That's why you're going to be over here, and we're going to be over here. And I think that when people get deplatformed and depersoned, that's the process that's happening, is they don't find a group on one side or the other to engage with.
Yeah, there's definitely wedges of the pieces of the pie of either kind that just you get to a point where you hit this wall and I don't want to hear anything other than my own stuff.
Sure. So let's talk about the decline of traditional community. So fraternal organizations are shrinking. So I think of the VFW, for example. Like, I'm a life member of the VFW, but I don't go to meetings regularly. It's just one of those things where I have my social connection elsewhere. But I know that in times past, that was a place where men would get together, especially like after the Vietnam War. That was the time where these things like the Elks Lodge and the VFW were really important for reintegration and dealing with things like shell shock, which we now call PTSD and things of that nature. Whereas now all of these organizations are more or less integrated. And so like dudes can't be open to talk about dude stuff. Because I remember the last time we went to a thing at the Elks Lodge here, there were more women than men there. And it used to be mostly a male-focused group. And you see this with many male spaces, like the Boy Scouts got infiltrated by the women, and they're like, oh, now we're just Scouting of America or whatever. But the girls, they still get to go ahead and keep their girls-only place. Yeah.
Yeah, make that make sense.
But it's something that is systematically tied to getting rid of things that are acceptable to be men's only. But yet, we're totally happy to go ahead and make things girls only.
It's the saddest thing. It really is.
Yeah. Another thing is like the decline of churches, generally speaking, I think is a thing is we've talked about this where I believe that among Protestant denominations and among the Catholic Church, that there's just been a general feminization of the church and a leaving behind of its patriarchal roots. And I think it is generally to the detriment because you'll see men leaving and the women will still be there, or the women will go ahead and go there looking for absolution after they've done all of their sowing of the wild oats and they're coming to go ahead and get their forgiveness.
Again, another turn of phrase that used to just be applied to men.
Sure. And they go ahead and come to Jesus and they'll be there in the pews. And then all of a sudden you'll see that the way that the word is preached and all of this is more catered to women than it is to men. And not even like a universal message. It is more catered to women. So as a result, men go ahead and abdicate their responsibilities and they go ahead and leave the church. And then now who do the women have? The sissy Nancy boys that are still there that are willing to go ahead and accept the programming. So I think it's interesting that it's the whole system of Christianity and Judaism is set up on a patriarchal basis and they're just like leaving it behind. But I think that there are the portions of the church that are growing the most are the ones that are going back to the patriarchy.
I hope still, at least at some point in our lifetime, to see a revival.
I think it's interesting because, like, when I talk about things in, like, deacons' meetings or in the General Assembly, like...
There's a move in the room.
There's a lot of
agreement.
There's
a shift.
And they're not the ones that want to say it. I'm willing to say the weird thing.
Yeah.
And they're not going to go ahead and disagree with it. And they definitely agree one way or the other. And it's really interesting to see that. And so I'm willing to go ahead and speak up for this kind of thing. And I think that people have been too afraid to do this for too long. And so as a result, you see this like incremental feminization of the church, which I think causes men to reject it.
Yeah.
Why do they want to be there if they're not welcome? Is the thought process.
Definitely. I feel like this whole mega church, non-denominational, like whitewash, millennial gray wash situation in churches is just like to make it palatable to the masses, really palatable to women.
Because it ends up being a center for entertainment rather than a center for connection. Because the church isn't the building, the church is the people that assemble there. And I think that's the thing that people forget all too often. And we can say it with our words, but unless we're actively going and mixing with our brothers and sisters, we are not handling our responsibilities to be the church.
Especially where it's concerned, where people talk about, I don't like church because I don't feel this and I don't like this. And it's
let's talk about feelings.
Okay. No, not even such feelings, but they do this and they don't do this. And you sound like you are coming to church to be served.
They're looking for the cafeteria approach.
No, not even in doctrine and whatever. Just
most of them don't even look at doctrine.
like I've seen, especially, now at the turn of the school year and stuff, you see, especially being a college town, a military-based town, stuff like that, People were like, I'm looking for a church that will do this, that has these kind of services and these kind of things, and what that services and programs that are for them.
Sure.
Rather than, why don't you go somewhere where the doctrine is good, the church structure is good,
And the leadership is sound.
You can start saying, hey, I see that maybe we could use this kind of service. Where can I help?
Yeah, how can I contribute? This reminds me of John F. Kennedy, where he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I think this is universally
Insert
applicable.
church for country.
No, but I think this is not just that. I think it's church. I think it's the society. I think it's family.
Yeah.
It is a universal maxim for making the world a better place, is finding your place where you can contribute your unique talents, skills, and abilities to make the world better.
It's definitely that comes from that entitlement mentality.
It's, I want to get everything that I can get rather than focusing on what I can give. And I see that as a problem throughout our society in so many ways.
Especially in the community of faith. Like, really?
I guess you can use that term loosely in that case, right? I would say that the people that are looking for the cafeteria approach are acting out of self-interest, which is a reasonable thing to do, but they are looking at it from self rather than looking at it from a selfless perspective. And I don't blame them for going ahead and looking at it from the prism of self-interest, but it is a social commentary on what is going on.
It is.
So let's talk about male isolation a little bit. So I think that dudes are having a harder and harder time finding good friends because they're busy looking at their phones or playing video games or whacking off in the tool shed, right? Rather than finding dudes, right? Instead of finding dudes to go ahead and be on this adventure of life with, right? This is like one of the biggest tips that I would go ahead and give to young dudes that are struggling is find 2 or 3 other dudes that are also struggling that you can see eye to eye with and fight the good fight together. Because I firmly believe that iron sharpens iron and that we are better together than we are apart.
And what's better, hopefully on your journey, you can find some individuals that are a little further along in the journey.
Sure, looking for mentorship. That's a little bit later on, but yeah. Definitely applicable.
But like, start this journey with, a couple of party members. Find a barbarian.
It reminds me of Final Fantasy 1, where you go ahead and you pick your party of 4, and then like you do the intro dungeon, you fight Garland, and then you go ahead and cross the bridge from Corneria, and then all of a sudden you got this narrative where it's like, the 4 light warriors, they approach in the thing, and they're like, they don't tell you about all the grinding they're going to have to do. It turns out that a lot of life is a grind, and it's just a matter of finding your meaning in the grind.
What was that one show? Was it Yu-Gi-Oh! That they did that whole thing about fellow travelers and stuff?
I don't remember that.
And they made like a little party out of it, and then they're like, stop talking about this like an RPG.
Maybe. That sounds roughly familiar. I don't know.
It was hilarious.
But the other piece of male isolation is you see that the average age of marriage has been delayed substantially in the United States compared to what it was 20, 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And that has a lot of implications in terms of family development. For example, our fertility rate is 1.6 in the United States. So that's below the rate of replacement. And a lot of it is if people are getting married later and later in life, then you just have less time in the fertility window to have kids in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right?
What was it when we were kids, like 2.3 or something?
We can look back at it, but I think that when we were kids, it was substantially higher. It was like 2.5 or 3. When we were at the baby boom, it was closer to 4 and things of that nature. But we'll go ahead and look into it. Just something to look at. But the thing is, like, for men, this isn't as big of a deal as it is for women. Because if dudes are sitting in security world or like paycheck to paycheck world, they probably shouldn't be like trying to start a family and things like that under those conditions. But a lot of people never leave those conditions because they want to treat minimum wage and low-skilled jobs as a bed rather than as a ladder. And so that's what they're going to end up with. Or they just never have kids or never get married in the first place.
The biggest, not the biggest, but like another factor to that is these women who want to go to college, go girl boss it out and all of that stuff, instead of finding a partner to start a family with and all of that stuff while the getting's good. And they run up against that game of musical chairs. And then by the time they actually go, oh no, I need to do this thing, and it's too late.
It reminds me of this saying that Mother Nature giveth and Father Time taketh away. So it's just one of those deals. But this whole loneliness thing is partly men not going ahead and getting past different levels of challenges to grow up into responsibility. Well, on the other side, it's why would they want to? A lot of times there's just not great options out in the marketplace.
No.
And the demands of somebody that's mid 4 to 6 through the moon. They want somebody that's making 250 grand a year and 6 foot and all this other
They're in
nonsense.
Delulu land.
They're in Delulu land. So you're going to end up with a situation where they can't couple because their expectations are mismatched.
And ill-timed.
Right. So if you can't get past like the isolation or brotherhood and connection stage of challenges, men fall into loneliness, addiction, disconnection, and they end up often in despair and depression.
And self-deletion.
Yeah, and self-deletion. So the next piece of the puzzle is identity and purpose. This is where you have a more positive outlook on things. Is you've got all of these other things. You have a network of people that support you. You've got your health squared away. You've got your basic security. You're in a stable job, like track that you can go ahead and live on and help others with. All of those things are in place before you're getting to this identity and purpose land.
Yeah, definitely the first 2 rungs, if you can make, that is like the biggest chasm to jump.
Yes.
And then if you can actually make this kind of relatively smaller chasm leap, this is where you are now on the upward trajectory.
Sure, and I think this is where you get to actually start being the hero of your own story. Is you've got a lot of the basics down, and now you are ready to go out on your adventure. So men, generally speaking, crave a sense of who they are and why they matter. Because it's really easy in our modern society to go ahead and live a soulless, meaningless life in all of the distractions and just barely making it.
I think, but that kind of origin of that whole decision and choosing your direction, plotting out your heading, it starts in the previous layer.
Yes. Sure.
Because then you need to seek out like who you're going to go along with as far as like companions, not an actual
partner.
companion.
Yeah, I got you. Like the people that you're going on the adventure with,
Yes.
you're building your party and going out on an adventure together. Once you've got those things in place, now you can plot a course together. So the 3 like main subheadings under this are things like the masculinity crisis is a big challenge here. Relationships and family formation. We talked a little bit about this in the previous thing, but I think we can go ahead and dig deeper on this. And then digital distractions and numbing. We addressed this a little bit in stage 2, but I think this is one of the big hurdles that keeps people from actually striking out and seeking their purpose and embracing a purpose.
Yeah. These 2 are actually 3 and 4 almost intermingled a little bit.
I think you alluded to this pretty well when you said that stage 3 is a relatively small hill to jump compared to stage 1 and 2.
There's a border between 3 and 4. They're actually part of the same kind of almost like landmass, if you will.
They're very similar.
Yeah. But it's like there's a narrow passageway where there's kind of this barrier and this very specific pathway you have to find the other side of it.
Sure. So let's go ahead and start with digital distractions and numbing. We already talked a little bit about pornography and OF and things like that. I think one of the things that makes it so dangerous from the perspective of somebody that wants to be upwardly mobile, not somebody that just wants to go ahead and live in survival land, is that it trains your brain to expect novelty, right? Where you can go ahead and find literally anything you want. People talk about diversity out in like Hollywood. When they go ahead and talk about Corno World, there is diversity. Anything you want, you can find it if you look hard enough.
Yeah.
You want to find a Nigerian dwarf dancers with doggos, like you can find it if you dig deep enough. There's all kinds of nonsense out there that you can find if you're looking hard enough. But that just like, it undermines real intimacy, right? Because you are looking at the carnal act, not necessarily the situation and circumstances that cause it to be fulfilling and connecting.
This is part of why I say, even though like actual substances and stuff are like, yeah, they're primarily traps that are fallen into by men. This kind of stuff is where women are attracted to self-destructive behaviors.
I think a lot of times it's just a lack of guidance on their part.
That hamster wheel thing, that this is where that is.
Sure.
Where they book talk and all of that is another one of these kind of things.
It's a form of escapism.
Yes.
It's you are dissatisfied with the life that you have, and so you are seeking that novelty elsewhere because you don't have it in your life to actually live.
And then when you're actually living that life, you are still seeking novelty, and you have all these like middle-aged, like even, mid-30s divorcees because they just want a different thing. They know they can get better, and then they're upset.
They just want to live their best life. Okay.
And then they're like destroyed when they can't find it.
Got it. Yeah. So I think along with pornography and gaming, like you can go ahead and escape in video games pretty easily.
Video games are fine.
They're fine.
But when you sit
moderation.
for hours and you play video games in your mom's basement, that's a problem.
Not only that, but in social media, you can go ahead and find your own echo chamber, like we were talking about before, but like you can find just validation for whatever viewpoint you've got, and you just tune in to your, person of choice to watch them get upset about whatever other person. So relationships and family formation, we talked a little bit about delayed marriage and fatherhood. So it's really hard for men to have their purpose in terms of building a legacy if they don't have children.
No next to pass the torch to, no legacy.
Yeah, and if you're only having 1.6 kids, are you really reproducing? No. Like, at that point, it is very easy for your genetic material to die off in a generation.
Yeah, and when it takes 2 and you're only having less than 2, there's no rate of replacement. It's a negative.
So also under this umbrella is like dating apps and the choice paradox, where you have the illusion of so many choices, like the whole pornography thing, but then like dudes are hitting like on thousands of people to go ahead and get one coffee date. Because on the other side of the coin, the women have all this deluge of interest, and they're just looking for the top 5 or 10% of dudes on the dating apps to go ahead and bang in bed rather than actually forming relationships. They may believe that it will lead them to a relationship, but what it is, they're just like, oh, you're hot, I'd like to get it poppin' kind of thing. And then I think the big ticket item in this place is the masculinity crisis. Is where I think this is where we get a lot of pushback, is we are very strict on traditional gender roles for our purposes. And that is the antithesis of what so many people want, because it screams in the face of their freedom to do whatever without consequence, or the consequences of their actions or the responsibilities that come with that freedom. And I think that, like we see in TV, you've got bumbling dads all over the place, and you're making everybody out to be a villain instead of holding up good examples of what a male role model should be.
You've got so much outcry about toxic masculinity, but nobody talks about toxic femininity.
Sure.
Which is actually the inverse in like happenstance, like in occurrence. There's way more toxic femininity out there than there is toxic masculinity.
And so what you end up doing is you end up giving men a framework of what not to be instead of a positive framework of what to be.
Yes.
So you give them nothing to aspire to, and you give them a checklist of things not to be. That doesn't really help them.
You just become a nagging woman.
Yeah, as a dude, you become a nagging woman.
Yeah. White knights and angry women on the internet that are a dime a dozen.
And you end up as simps too, right?
Yep.
It's like you don't understand your own value. And if you're at this stage of development, you are valuable to someone or to something.
Yeah.
And a lot of dudes just do not know their value because they don't have something to aspire to. And our system of society and the feminine social order shames men for being masculine.
So you have to be almost that much more masculine, like we talked about with the whole alpha thing.
Sure.
Like you almost have to out alpha the normal threshold that would be if we weren't in a feminized society.
So I think as a result of things like the masculinity crisis, like not having something to aspire to, and relationships being delayed and things of that nature, as well as all the distractions that you can go ahead and get caught up in, these are just crazy challenges that dudes have to overcome and will never lead the strong, self-actualized life that they can unless they break free of these things and find their own like core tenets and values to stick to and move on from.
This makes it so painfully obvious, painfully for me. It hurts my heart. It really does. Why men are so lost, why men don't know anymore how to be men.
That's why we're here, right? Is because we see this as a huge problem in society and we want to go ahead and move the needle to help the helpable. There are going to be some people that are just like closed off to the message and they're just like
We see them all the time in the comments.
and then there's plenty of people that are coming around to it. It's just one of those deals where like people often shame the things that they don't like, not because of the actual arguments or the thought process, but because it is foreign to them. So if this layer fails, men often drift aimlessly. They are unable to follow or form solid identities for themselves, and they numb out on digital worlds rather than embracing reality for what it is.
Yeah.
So
They're lost.
let's move on to the last bit, which is fulfillment and legacy. This is the top tier of the challenges.
This is what it's all about.
This is what
the
it
good
is.
stuff.
The highest need is to build something that lasts and is meaningful. The three core tenets of this are purpose and contribution, fatherhood and mentorship, and spiritual and philosophical growth. These are the things that matter. So we talked a little bit about fatherhood, and you hit on mentorship a little bit earlier on, and I think this is really the piece of it, is whether you find somebody that's ahead of you or you are the one serving to help somebody that's behind you in the race. I think that the idea of a relay race is something that is such a valuable illustration for this, is I will not be able to accomplish all the things that I set forth to accomplish in my lifetime. And hopefully there are things that my sons or someone that is of like mind can take on my behalf down the road to achieve something great for society.
Yeah, to have the whole trajectory mapped out so that you can hand it off to somebody else.
Yes, and I would love nothing more that when my time to end the race is done, to hand it off to somebody and say, you got this, soldier, make it happen, and to send them on their quest. Yeah, and like raising children is another piece of that. It's a natural form of mentorship.
Natural form of that, yeah. But also, it's been interesting to get into, to cross over that threshold into our 40s and have, I know that in the last year or so, like I've had this epiphany where, oh my gosh, yeah, we've been married a minute. We now have teenage children.
Yes.
And it's been this weird, it's hit me like a bolt of lightning where it's just, I'm in this place now where I can start to speak on these things. I have enough of the street cred or whatever to like, I have enough of the chops to say, hey, I've done a thing or two and I've learned a thing or two. Here, let me tell you about it. Whereas I've actually, I think, spent the better part of 10 years trying to look for somebody who can mentor me, largely unsuccessfully. I've had a few kind of cross at odd times throughout that span who have been able to give me a thing or two to go on. But I've never had that like real come alongside kind of person.
Sure.
And at this point, that's not a clear need that I have anymore. But now I'm at this point where I realize maybe now I can be that to somebody.
Sure.
At least.
Or at least for a portion of their journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you found more than anything else is you found mentorship in a portion of your journey, depending on where you were at in the process. And I think that it's just a realistic thing for dudes to be in that same way. It is very rare for somebody to find a mentor to take them from A to Z. Oftentimes, it's one mentor from A to B and another one from D to M and so on and so forth. Yeah. It's just a matter of where you are and the challenges you face in life.
And I think in this culture, it's like the biggest thing is like, where do we find those? Like, how do we find this? And I've had even just as a female, talking to other females who have been like, where do we find those people? Can we have people come and tell us like what's up? Especially in a more traditional worldview.
Sure. I think you find that in community, partially, and other partially is maybe you need to go ahead and pay for that. It's one of those things where, hey, if you can't find it in your community or network, maybe you need to go ahead and pay for a coach or something. And that's okay. There's no shame in that.
But even just in the past, like last week, like at church and stuff, we were actually talking about where do we find these people that we can come into their lives? And that's more now the conversation has shifted or the query has shifted to that. And I think that's one, it's a really cool place to be. Sure. But two, it's like, how do we find those?
I think
help you.
This is one of the ways to do that is to go ahead and have a message and to see who it connects with. And sure, it may not be like a really intimate connection, but maybe through community, you can find people that can connect. And that's something that maybe we can go ahead and grow down the way. So another thing to hit on is that it's important to have purpose and direction, right? Men want to know that life matters. A lot of times dudes build businesses or they make art or they set up acts of service or they lead organizations. And like, this isn't like a rich or poor thing, right? Because this is where I see the biggest struggles in the second and third generation of wealthy families. When dad went ahead and set up all the wealth, son and grandson often have struggles if they don't have an independent identity and they only live on the fat of the land, right? And without a sense of purpose, even wealthy, healthy men can feel hollow inside, even with access to everything.
I've seen...
It's like hedonism.
Yeah.
Like hedonism is fun for a little bit, but then you realize afterwards that it's vanity. Mm-hmm. I think some guy wrote a book about this a while ago.
But I saw a video once a long time ago, that very kind of thing with the heir to the Johnson & Johnson fortune.
Okay.
Where he was talking about, I've been really into oil painting. And he's like, but the business, it runs itself. Sure. And I just get the income. Right. And so my dad actually told me that I need to like invest in some hobbies, be part of some charitable organizations. And he taught me how to live a life of significance in the context of extreme wealth.
When you don't have to go ahead and labor to earn it, now you have all this time to live a life that has meaning in a different context. Mm-hmm. And it is really easy to see people miss the mark on that. The last bit is spiritual and philosophical growth. When you're at this level, it is often that men turn to faith or philosophy or some kind of civic duty to have a higher purpose. And nowadays, we live in this secular, fragmented world where people don't have grounding narratives to make sense of things like suffering and sacrifice. And so without these underpinnings or these common cultural mythologies or religion, a lot of times people will be led astray to all kinds of manner of nonsense when they don't have grounding philosophies to hold on to.
You just see them worshiping and steeped in their own self-importance.
Sure. They worship themselves rather than worshiping that which is worthy.
This is a culture that glorifies that epitomizes that.
Well, yeah, it's all about me and not about what can I do. It's like the conversation we had earlier about, hey, it's not what's in it for me, not what can I go ahead and contribute. Now, with these three things in mind, having meaning and purpose, fatherhood and mentorship, and spiritual and philosophical growth, if this layer fails, men can go ahead and have financial or romantic success, but then they live a hollow life. And it is this thing that is the modern ultimate challenge, the final boss for men, is to go ahead and find a life worth leading and a life worth living something better than they found it, which used to be a pretty ubiquitous thought process, is how do I live and leave things better than I found it? And that thought process is rarer and rarer today.
Especially seeing now that I am actively in the business of leaving a piece of literally of myself on this green earth that is better than I was, and I'm seeing the fruit of that labor. I know that I'm doing this.
Cool. Let's go ahead and land the plane.
Sure.
Cool. So the hierarchy of needs, or the hierarchy of challenges in this case, shows how economic and health stability, safety, belonging, identity, and legacy are the primary challenges that are before men today in the modern context. And that if any lower layer collapses underneath them, you immediately fall from wherever you are to there. Because at the baseline expectation, if you are not meeting your basic security needs, it doesn't matter if you have purpose and meaning if you can't pay the bills. It doesn't matter if you want to go ahead and have this charitable spirit if you have nothing with which to be charitable, if you don't have the energy to do that. And so for men in their prime years, one of the biggest challenges for them is not only facing these 5 layers of challenges, but putting them in their proper order so that you're not misbuilding the house. It's it's important to go ahead and pour a nice solid foundation before you start building the house. Otherwise, you can have this beautiful 3-story house, but if you don't have a foundation that can support it, it's going to come crumbling to nothing. Like that. And that's really sad. But it's important that we understand that it is possible to get these things. It just takes work. And it takes finding the right brothers to go ahead and stand beside you and climb the mountains and slay dragons together. Do you have any final thoughts? No? Cool. All right. That'll do it for us today. If you want to go ahead and see the rest of the podcast because you're watching a clip right now, go ahead and click right there. And if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe right over here. Thanks so much for watching. Make it a great day.